Well, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for coming today. We're really fortunate, we feel lucky that you were able to join us today. And this is a great mix of innovators and investors and advisors and people all passionate about entrepreneurship, fintech, trends, and of course personal finance, which is all great. Just as background, Ann Duane, on behalf of Ben Casnoka, Eric Torenberg, Ross Fabini, we're here to welcome you. Village Global organizes itself as a network, and our investors, our LPs in our early stage fund, invest both time and money for the next wave of entrepreneurs. And then in addition to the four of us here in San Francisco, we curate a network of angel investors and founders around the world who help us identify and support those founders. And the third is we just love to create community wherever we can so that founders are learning and growing faster. And in this room, we feel lucky to have a bunch of, as I said, innovators, advisors, VCs, and collaborators. So, and one of our network leaders is Alexa von Tobel. And I'm going to read her bio because it is impressive and I don't want to forget things. So, founder and managing partner of Inspired Capital and the New York Times bestselling author of Financially Fearless and the upcoming Financially Forward, which we have copies in the back so you can get a signed copy. And prior to Inspired, Alexa founded LearnVest in 2008 with the goal of helping people make progress on their money. And after raising $75 million in VC, LearnVest was acquired by Northwestern Mutual in 2015 in one of the biggest fintech acquisitions of the decade. And so following that acquisition, she really led innovation at Northwestern Mutual. And she's appeared on the cover of Forbes magazine, a recent interview with NPR's How I Built This, amazing, and been featured in a whole variety of publications from New York Times to Vogue, and is really a face of entrepreneurship and diversity in entrepreneurship, and a member of the 2016 class of Henry Cowan Fellows, and an inaugural member of President Obama's Ambassadors for Global Entrepreneurship. So she's been honored with so many things. Forbes 40 Under 40, Fortune's Most Powerful Women, Forbes 30 Under 30, Magazine's 30 Under 30, World Economic Forum's Young Global Leader. And originally from Florida, Alexa attended Harvard College and Harvard Business School before settling in New York, where she currently resides with her husband and 3 children. And we're going to get into how she does this all, because it's pretty fascinating. So without further ado, welcome, Alexa.
So happy to be here. I'm just a massive fan of what the Village Global team's built, so just truly honored to get to be here with all of you guys today.
Well, we appreciate that. So let's get right into it. Can you share a story or two that really shaped you as a founder?
Oh my goodness. Well, so we'll just start with the beginning story, which is I dropped out of Harvard Business School on December 18th of 2008, like actually when the markets were pretty much like at their worst. And I just remember having a really important like inner conversation. I was a sole founder, so it wasn't like I got to go lean on somebody else. We had no venture funding, we had no dollars committed. I didn't grow up in like a super fancy household where I like had all my bills paid for. So starting LearnVest was pretty terrifying, and I also had to seed it pretty much myself out of my own savings. So that was even more terrifying at a time when the markets were literally the worst that they can be and people were hiding money under their mattresses, literally. So good time to drop out of business school and go start a company. And I just had this really thoughtful instinct, which was when everybody zags, you have to zag. And I use this one, and so this is, I will say, my kind of most honest founding story, which is I always say that life is really short, and when I was an undergrad at Harvard, I worked in the happiness lab, and they took people who were in their 90s and had them look back on their life and ask them, what would you have changed? And nobody ever changes anything they did, because all the stupid stuff you do, like you don't even remember, which is great. That's a really helpful fact to know that like at 90, you won't remember the small stuff and you won't remember the mistakes, but what you will remember is like the shots on goal you didn't take, and very clearly they had their regrets. And so 90-year-old Alexa sits on my shoulder, and on that day I cried and then walked into the admissions office and was like, I'm dropping out, don't try to convince me, I'm leaving. Don't convince me, I've got to go, goodbye, and thank you, I will have no student loans, bye-bye. And walked out. And that was it. And I had to like tell them not to convince me to try to change my mind because I was afraid I would. And I didn't look back. But I will just say that was a really important moment of just courage and guts, which is having that 9-year-old Alexa.
Like it. And we covered some of your highlights of your career, which are numerous, but there must have been some tough times.
Tons.
And can you share a tough time?
Yeah. I wish my husband was here. So I met my husband in undergrad, and I'll give you 2 quick ones. First, in that first year, when it was 2009, we were launching the company, and that first year, it took me 6 months to knit together some angel funding. Part of the reason that I founded Inspired Capital in New York City was it just was astounding to me that there were so few places to go for capital. New York Angels gave me $50,000, and I was like, great, that pays for nothing. So my husband told this story at our wedding, because when I started LearnVest, I literally sat on his couch. Annie, who's here in the back, 11 years ago, was a sophomore at Princeton. I convinced her to train up on the weekends and like take the internship for free, and reminded her to bring a computer because we had no budget to give people computers. But my husband told this story at our wedding, which was he would just come home day in, day out after work, and there I'd be sitting on his couch with my laptop just working furiously alone. And sometimes he'd walk in, I literally just would have like tears coming down my face, like furiously working, but just because someone had said no, something didn't go right, and it was literally me getting the company off the ground. And he always knew it was a really bad day when there was just like a bottle of wine there with the tears, and he was like, oh shit, like it's been a bad one. And then, so that's one example of just like persistence and resilience and just like knowing that I was doing the right thing in my gut, and I just knew I had to muscle through that period. I think the world is a much different place, and I actually, as an investor, I remind people, I want those entrepreneurs, the ones who will sit there and just get pummeled over and over again, because I think those are the best entrepreneurs who also, I had to be thoughtful about every single dollar because there was no money, and it was 2008, 2009, and you had no idea what the world was gonna look like on the other side of it. Another just quick story I'll say is, I think the hardest decision to an entrepreneur is when you get a management decision wrong. When you've hired somebody who's super important or super expensive and you convinced your board why this was a good hire, you've gotten everybody, and 90 days in, it's not working out. And you're just like, oh my goodness, do I have to go back through that process of hiring and exit this person? And those are the ones where you know the right decision, but you're like, ooh, I can make it work. And it's kind of like being in a bad relationship where you when you know you have to get out of it. And I made all the mistakes like young entrepreneurs do, which is just took too long to make those hard calls. And I'll just say in my older, tougher days, I'm like, nope, doesn't work, gotta make a call. And you move on and you realize that the real pain is when you just don't make those choices fast enough. And I always knew when I made a bad call because I would wake up at 4 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning. And so that's my other story my husband likes to tell, is he always knew that I had like a tough day ahead of me when I was up at 3, and he didn't even convince me to try to sleep through the night. He'd be like, all right, go ahead, just go. And I would just sneak out of bed and take my laptop and start working because it'd be the only thing that would comfort just how stressed out I was.
Wow. So you have 90-year-old Alexa, and you have this conscience that wakes you up at night. Wow.
Yeah. Being a founder is a total blast, I promise.
The glamour. Okay. So now let's switch gears a little bit into your fintech innovation. And what advice might you have for founders finding product market fit for fintech companies?
So I really believe that we are entering the most exciting decade for fintech. The pipes exist for all sorts of innovation around our wallets. Health and wealth are the 2 things you can never avoid. They're there every day of your life. And so first I wrote the book Financially Forward just to like talk about all these major trends that are affecting our wallet. But one thing I will say for entrepreneurs is it's really important that wherever you innovate is a place you're extremely passionate about. The fintech world, I would say the barriers to entry are bigger. There's more than ever, you have regulatory environments. Do you have to be an RIA? Are you SEC registered? All of those types of decisions. And then additionally, It's complicated in that it often requires a lot of capital to go and innovate. You can't like overnight build a bank with a dollar. Whereas like you could launch maybe the next Instagram with very little money. You can't really innovate so quickly in the fintech space because you need infrastructure. So it just requires an entrepreneur who really loves it. So I always tell entrepreneurs, I am obsessed with helping Americans with their wallets. I think it's just such a stabilizing thing that you can do to give families stability with their money. And so for me, building LearnVest was an obvious choice. And I was thrilled to go to work every day, even on the hard days. So I always tell people in the fintech space, there's almost a higher bar for the entrepreneur. And so it's just, I want to make sure when people go into fintech that you actually love it. But it's also such an exciting place right now with everything around cryptocurrencies and blockchain. And then on the flip side, insurtech, fintech, I mean, these terms didn't exist in 2009 when I dropped out of school and was going to start this. Like fintech wasn't the term. And now it's an entire field that has literally billions of dollars being poured into it.
Great. And you made the decision to sell LearnVest to Northwestern Mutual. Any thoughts on advising founders who might be going through or thinking about acquisition?
Sure. So I wish that, first of all, acquisitions are, such an amazing opportunity. They don't happen to every entrepreneur. It is just like anything else. It's a true marriage. And I took my acquisition with Northwestern Mutual as just that. We had a few opportunities, and the CEO was just such a great guy. They had the same value system that we did. And it was nuts, but we went through 4 months of diligence, not 90 days, not 30 days. You have amazing stories like the WhatsApp acquisition, which was like 2 weeks. I was like, that would have been amazing. That was not my experience. It really was. It was the day before Thanksgiving is when it started, and we closed on March 25th of 2015. A few days before I had my first child. I was literally 9 months pregnant. So that was probably the longest 4 months of my life on every level. But the way I thought about that was it was really a marriage, and I signed up for a marriage and stayed at the company almost 4 full years after because I just believed so much in what we were doing and what we were working on. And you really want to make sure if you're going to do that, that it is exactly that, and that as the entrepreneur, you're signing up for that. Because otherwise, it could be a really unfun experience if you sell your company to somebody that you're not that excited about, and then you're inside, tends to not be a great, founders tend to not love the post-acquisition experience. I did, but because we were so thoughtful, and I'll give you a quick example of that. Northwestern Mutual hadn't acquired anything in 25 plus years. It wasn't like they were an Amazon-like machine just buying lots of, or a Walmart-like machine. So they literally made us plan a day in McKinsey's offices in New York City in like February, where we all sat around the table and like just talked about like our values for like 10 hours. And I remember thinking to myself, I don't have a crib. I have so much stuff I need to do right now. And like, we're just sitting here talking about our values. And I'm like, is there anything other tangible that we need to get to? Cause like, I need to go and like literally put together a crib. But it was just such an important, in retrospect, I was so glad that that's how they approached this, because it was very much like we were going to be married and we needed to make sure we have enough of that for the relationship on the other side of this. And we did all sorts of big decisions, and Northwestern Mutual took the software and made it part of the whole platform. And so it was a very unique story, and I think we'll see more and more of those types of acquisitions going forward.
So you're bullish on old,
established. It was 161 years old in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, doing about $35 billion in revenue. It's a massive company. It is definitely an old one.
Yeah, that's so interesting because there's a little bit of Silicon Valley bias against sell to Stripe, but don't sell to Northwestern Mutual. So it's interesting that you made it work.
We made it work
for both parties. Yeah, that's great. And any specific tips you might have for women founders or underrepresented founders?
I just think the world is changing so much. I gave a speech the other day where I was like, the Women's March can't be unmarched, like ever. Like we have passed a moment in time where I'm just so excited about the future. I think one of the reasons why I love to do speaking events is I just think the role modeling aspect is so important. You need to see different people talking about entrepreneurship and, particularly in things like fintech. I think that having more voices at the table is really important. In our venture fund, we have 3 partners of 4, and one's a man. He's our diversity play, which is amazing. He's so great. He's the best guy. He's like, I'm the diversity. And that wasn't by design. We were hiring and bringing in the smartest. It happened to look that way. And as a result, what I think is really special is we're not a female-focused fund. We invest in everything. But we see more females because they bring their products to us. And we won this pretty unique deal because there were 7 term sheets at the table, and we were the only one that had females. And I was like, wow, it is a differentiator. But I just think the world is changing, and I'm so proud of that, and I'm so excited for that. And I just, again, there's no going back. That march was marched, and there's just no way that we don't just make a lot more progress in the future.
That's great. And before we get into your book, you're a founder, an author, a VC. How do you manage it all? What's work-life harmony for you?
So I'm sitting here. I have an 8-week-old baby. So the big joke with my entire family is that we just have babies and launch companies or sell companies at the same time, which is a horrific idea. Don't do it. Nobody should follow this rule. But it's, I think what I've just learned for me is if you look, people always are like, what's your key to work-life balance? And I never had an answer. And in fact, I still don't have a great answer, but I have my most honest answer, which is if you love your job, it's not work. I got picked up at 4 o'clock this morning, and I was like, oh man, I think I've slept for 3 hours. But I love doing this, and if you really, really enjoy it, I think that is the best solution to work-life balance is you have to love what you're going to do. And it doesn't mean every day is beautiful and perfect, but I actually find just something so satisfying. So basically, I do work and I do family, and I do nothing else. I joke I don't have any hobbies because this is my hobby. And it's just the one way I figure it out. And then technology is incredible. The fact that, my mom had 3 kids and worked full time, was a single parent, and she didn't have any of the technology that Amazon delivers everything to my door, all the food, all the groceries. I can do it in 1 minute. That's really powerful. And then it's obviously wonderful that you also can have help and babysitters. My husband does a lot, and it's great.
That's great. And now we'll move to the book, Financially Forward. And it's a great read. And my favorite tip was if you put a picture of a pet or a baby in your wallet, it's much more likely to be returned if it's lost. There's so many practical tips in this book.
The reason I wrote a book, there was a bestseller in 2013, just really focused on super basic advice around your wallet. And then I realized that just the world has evolved so much. Technology can do so much more for you. And so I said to myself, we need to put it all in one place. And I'm super passionate about the future of, again, where our wallets are headed. And so the sort of tips that are in the book range from everything like your 5 smartest hacks to when you shop online to the future of what our wallets will look like. Because money is going really digital so quickly. We went from spending 30% cash to 24% cash, meaning we are just dramatically, as a culture in the United States, using less cash every day. And that has really important implications to how you think about your own wallet. And also, if you're not good at spending, the future could get harder. But then to the future of things like the gig economy, the sharing economy, and all the ways that we're putting more money back in our wallet. And I'll give you an example. If you would have asked me 3 years ago, rent the runway, where you can rent a dress, I'd been like, that's great. Maybe I would use that for one big occasion. They now are rolling out an entire way for you for $150 a month to have unlimited access to clothes. And you're just starting to realize that there's these services that are going to be able to put, or ride sharing services, et cetera. You don't need to own a car anymore. If you do the math of insurance and parking and everything versus just taking an Uber or a Lyft whenever you need to and whenever you want it. And if you extrapolate the future in 10 years, what that basically means for the average family, which 78% of the country lives paycheck to paycheck, you end up putting more money back in your own wallet. And that's pretty powerful because we don't need to own nearly as much as we do. The average household owns 300,000 items on average, 300,000 items in your house. which is why the Marie Kondo effect, like we should have all predicted that and then invested. It's like, she's like, bless your stuff and get rid of it. And we're all like, yes, we need less. But that's where we're heading, which is you own very few things. You can get the best of what you need when you need it in that moment. And ultimately that means more money back in our pockets, which I think is really important.
And building on that theme, as more things go digital, is there an inevitable trade-off with privacy, and does that concern you?
Yes. So I think if you had two options, which is do you use technology around your wallet or not, I would say we'd all be idiots not to use it. Because you should have online banking and digital access to everything, and you need to check your credit score. So actually, you have to use it. So it's really about using it smartly, and I think just making sure that you have good hygiene around it. So that's things, and again, there's an entire section around, okay, so how do I make sure that my social security number hasn't been hacked or that I've had an issue? And there's literally a calendar of here's exactly what you should do every year to just make sure you have the hygiene in place to make sure you're being proactive. The internet has so many facts on all of us, and it's not going away. So it's what do you need to do, the most simple investment of time that helps you stay ahead of that.
And you identified really clearly 6 trends in the book about the future of money. What opportunities do you think they create for entrepreneurs? And specifically, does that inform what you look for as an investor?
100%. So I'll give you an example. This is the sort of stuff that like I totally geek out on and think about. Outside of just the fact that I do believe our wallets will take care of themselves at some point, because it's math. I love math. I've always liked math. And at the end of the day, your wallet is just a big math equation that happens to have lots of variables coming through it. So at some point, the math should do itself. Until we get there, we talk about the 6 major trends that are changing your wallet, and I'll give you one example. Right now, if you go into like a coffee shop, you know, there's chalkboards on the wall, and it's like coffee's $3.99, and your croissant is $2.99, and that's all day long, and that store owner, you know, is juggling selling, you know, X, Y, and Z to you. It kind of makes no sense that those prices don't change intraday. In the morning when it's a long line, that coffee should maybe be $4.19, not $3.99. And in the evening when it's like really nobody goes into the coffee shop, maybe it's a $2.99 coffee. The internet does that. But in physical reality, we don't have those things. So these are the sort of trends that I've spent a lot of time thinking about of what happens to our wallets when, and that actually becomes the output of, right now our credit card doesn't have like a geolocator on it, and it doesn't have any really clear, tangible benefits of what I care about. But when your bank account and your entire wallet just becomes your phone, that coffee shop as I walk in can be like, Alexa, it's your 3rd day coming here, your coffee's free, it's on us. Why do we have the little cards where they stamp it? Makes 0 sense. But those are the sort of things that you're gonna start to see, and that, what I just discussed, actually opens up an entire new category of digital marketing, which is to the minute transactionally, when you want to buy something, we are giving you exactly what you care about, as opposed to it's Memorial Day, it's 20% off. That is a coupon that makes no sense. As opposed to you are going to buy a couch because you've walked into a couch store twice and we now know that you want one. And I just think that we're going to end up having everything be faster, closer, and to the dollar amount of what we want to spend at all times as we go forward in the future.
Exciting. Okay, so now we have a little bit of a lightning round, then we'll open up to audience Q&A. But Bitcoin, long or short?
Long.
And can you say a little more?
Yeah, so, you know, I think that the technology of blockchain is incredibly powerful. It's gonna take a really long time, just like anything else. The last 3 chapters of the book, we just go through and, you know, really great detail why and what it means and where it will go. But it's, you know, powerful computer science technology, leveraging cryptography, and at its core, what it will allow us to do, and Bitcoin is an output of it, but what it will allow us to do is own your own data, you'll own your own data, and we will be able to transact fluidly. So I wish I had a crystal ball to say, you know, right now technology being used for technology's sake doesn't make sense, but the technology is real. And so when will it hit mainstream? I think we'll have a lot of ups and downs and bumps, so don't run out and buy Bitcoin. It's now back on the rise. That's not good financial planning advice. But I think that the possibilities it brings are very real, and it will empower, it'll create all sorts of dark problems, it will create all sorts of very powerful opportunities, and I do believe it will be an advancement for our wallets.
How about Apple credit card?
100%. So right now, Apple Pay, I think, is being, as of a few months ago, about 13% of people use Apple Pay. Just again, your phone has a face recognition. Like if you watch Game of Thrones, it's hard to steal your face unless it's like you're Arya Stark. And so I think what's really powerful about that your phone becomes your wallet. That's what happens. And that means all sorts of great things. You right now could go and just take my wallet out, take my credit card, go have a fun shopping spree. No one's gonna ask for your ID. You're gonna have charged whatever you want. And in about 24 to 48 hours, either I notice or my bank doesn't probably notice if you're shopping right here. That wouldn't be an odd behavior. But at some point, they'll be able to refund me and I'll get a new credit card, and it's kind of a whole process. If you're trying to steal my phone to go shop, you can't use facial recognition is so powerful. And so what we're gonna start to see is, and not only is it powerful, that phone has so much more data about me. So again, those marketing ads and the coupons and all of the different elements that I'll have will be more customized to me. It's far more secure because you could steal my wallet. And there's no such thing as it's ludicrous that you have to wait for another credit card to be sent to you and that you have to constantly be updating the numbers. I mean, we're gonna laugh about that. I laugh about checks because who writes checks still? But so many places still make you do it. All of that will go away, I think, in the next 5 to 7 years. And just the whole process of being like, I've got to get a new credit card is just ridiculous. Mm-hmm. It's a ridiculous concept because your phone becomes your wallet. And so I think that's what happens. Last thing I'll just say on that, when your phone becomes your wallet, we really take advantage, we take for granted the fact that we live in America where we have access to safe savings. Most of the planet does not. So only 40 countries have access to safe savings accounts. So many countries that are impoverished and don't have the appropriate kind of structural, adequate structural dynamics. Basically, people don't get access to saving. And if you think about that, that is the stability of a family, which is like, it's okay if you don't do X because I got you, because we have extra money. And if you can't save safely, you cannot protect your family. But overnight, if your phone, most of the planet has a phone, an iPhone. That's actually one of the first things that people actually buy. So overnight, you can give the entire globe access to safe savings. That is like groundbreaking what that could mean to actually give huge swaths of populations across the planet stability. And so again, money is stability for families. That is why it matters so much.
And does your fund invest globally?
So we will look at things globally. We're going to focus primarily on the United States, but we're looking at a company tomorrow in the UK. So we'll look everywhere, but yeah.
Okay. And now, what's your information diet? You're a busy person. How do you stay updated? Because a lot of stuff's going on.
I would also just love everyone else's opinion on this because I think I have the people in my life that are the people I always like to catch up with who are super smart at X. So that's, I think, the best way that I stay smart and relevant is just actually the people that I know are incredibly good at certain topics and always asking them and getting their opinion on things. But then I'm just like anybody else, which is like the New York Times summary. Companies like The Information, Jessica Lesson is a dear friend, so read it, voraciously. My Instagram, I don't follow people, I follow news outlets of all shapes and sizes because I actually don't want the information that I already assume is the answer. I try to follow all of the divergent opinions as much as possible. But I will say, I often feel really overwhelmed too. My husband will be like, did you hear about blah, blah, blah? And I'm like, no, how did I miss that? It's hard to keep up because there's just so much more. So it is something that I'm always trying to be smarter about that I don't have a perfect answer on.
That's great. And I did notice that Founders of the Skim wrote one of the reviews of your book on the back.
I'm an advisor to the company, The Skim, which is another one of those. I read it every morning. If you don't get it, you should absolutely. It is literally like everything you need to know in sentences. It's amazing.
And last question before it's opening up to all of you. Can you take us behind the curtain of what happens at Inspired Capital? So when a founder presents, what happens next in the investment process?
So our firm literally launched January 15th. So we are like slightly older than my baby that was born 8 weeks ago. But I think a few things, and this is I think one of the reasons why I also love Village Global so much, is just one, we're operators. So our partners in the fund, one of them founded Paperless Post. One of them is this great woman, Penny Pritzker, who was Obama's Secretary of Commerce. And then another gentleman, Mark, who's been with me and head of strategy. He and I were the deal team for LearnVest all the way through the acquisition, and then we ran a venture fund at Northwestern Mutual together. And so what we like to do is extreme diligence as operators. And for us, just when you're the person putting together the plans, we often just try to immediately just sit on the other side of the table with the entrepreneur to say, forget us even investing, let's just help you get a better plan in place. And so that's kind of where we start and how we approach the conversation. One, we at the minimum add some value, and then it also helps us get a really good sense of really what we believe the business is capable of, et cetera. And so that's kind of how we approach it, and it's just leveraging our strengths, but also, I was the entrepreneur on the other side of the table. You don't want anyone wasting your time because you have none of it, and time is actually your most limited resource. It's not money. And so we also want to just add as much value as we quickly can. And we find entrepreneurs really like us because we can help do a lot of work for people.
Okay, one last question. I lied. One last question. So at Village, we believe it's a myth of the self-made man or woman that everyone has someone who helps them in their life. And for you, who's helped you?
So at Village, you think it's a myth that not everybody's had somebody?
No, that it's people who say I'm self-made.
Oh, there's no such thing as being self-made.
Yeah. We're influenced by people. And so who has been a mentor to you?
So I am so lucky. I think, one, I know that I don't know all the answers, and I've always been comfortable being I know nothing about that. Please help me. And asking for a lot of help. And I've always been comfortable doing that my whole life. And I think I've just been really lucky. So basically I always say you should have a mentor from every decade because every decade is different and the era was different and the tidbits that you take away from that are different. So I have literally a mentor who's in his 80s. Don't ever get breakfast with him because he always shows up 45 minutes early. So I always get to things 15 minutes early and he literally is standing outside on the street waiting for me as though I'm late. And I'm I'm early, but I'm late for you. And his name's Anson Beard, and he picks up the phone and calls people for everything. And I have another amazing mentor who is my biggest angel investor in LearnVest. She was not an angel investor. She was an early Goldman Sachs partner, and I'm literally her next door neighbor now. She has a tiny little house outside of the city. Sorry, I bought the shack of her house, and I'm literally next door neighbors with her. And I'll just say that. I've had so many people help me, and it's why I try to pay it forward as much as possible when I can, because I would never be sitting here today if it wasn't only for all of those people. And then also my own family. I have 2 big brothers, and they've always been keep up, and I think have taught me just a lot of resilience because they just always were literally, I was 5 years younger, and they were if you can keep up, you can play with us. And as a result, I just always had to run hard. And it just wired me in a certain way, so.
Okay, so now open it up. Questions? Yeah. I don't think you can stump Alexa, so any question?
Ask any question of any shape and size.
Hi, how do you juggle family and work for your 3 kids?
Yeah, so this, how do I juggle family? So my husband is also an entrepreneur, so if you can imagine, so we had a family summit last weekend where we literally went into our office and whiteboarded the entire everything out. And I just approached it like I approach anything else. And I'm what are we trying to optimize for? What are our 3 sacred cows? What are the things that matter? And then everything else has to go away. we can't perfect what our kids wear every day. Doesn't matter. Like my daughter wears unicorn outfits with her pajamas to school, and we're like, great, you're so amazing, you're so unique. We didn't dress you for school properly today, cool. But on the flip side, like one of us puts her to bed every night. And so I think it's just like as much organization as possible. And we also, as I said, we are doing things that we love. So often like a date is like my husband and I sitting in bed with like both of our laptops out drinking wine, and I'm like, I'm really excited about this idea, and he's like, cool, and we like sit and we like jam on it together, and like that's a date for us, which I know that sounds super like that's a loser date, but we do it, and that's what I meant when I said we don't really have hobbies, like we're doing exactly what we want to do, but then there are times where I'm like, whew, there's a lot up in the air, something's gonna fall down, and I think that the stuff that doesn't fall is like our job and our kids. So other things were like, I have a best friend, literally a best friend I'm seeing tonight, and I have not sent her a wedding present. And I have 1 week until the 1 year mark. And I'm like, God, I'm just gonna have to buy something. I was trying to have like divine intervention for an amazing present. And so I just like, also have people in my life that give me that space to be like, your wedding present's gonna be a year late, but you love me. So not everything's perfect. So was super lucky in the sense that we just had some anchors step up. So before we even announced the fund, we had more than half of it's a $200 million fund, we had most of it committed. So we're finishing the final portion. So I'm like finishing a touch of fundraising right now. But just, it was a great situation to have anchors kind of there. I also don't mind fundraising, and again, it goes back to if you do what you love, then telling people why I'm so passionate about building what I'm building is easy because I'm building what I want to be building, if that makes any sense. So again, if I was like sitting here selling toothbrushes, like I would be like, I'm not the best person to do it and probably wouldn't raise a dollar. But I really believe in what we're doing at Inspired Capital. I believe that the New York ecosystem is light on capital, and I think that having a real operator's DNA in New York City behind great companies is what the city needs, and I am fortunate that people really agree. So, you had a question?
Yeah. So, a small percentage of VC money still goes to women, and you obviously were the exception to that. I would love just some practical advice, like on pitching or just in general when you're faced with those opportunities to make an impression. What should we be doing differently or
Yeah.
more?
So I will give you the most like practical advice possible. So I always say, find your 3 smartest friends, whoever they are, like your 3, and be like, can I pitch you? And let them just beat it up. They're gonna be like, what about this? What about this? This is wrong. And first of all, the questions that are the same for everybody are then very clear questions that you need to get down. I also just believe practice makes perfect. So like, if you're talking to an investor, it's not, this is the first time I've ever talked about this. Like you should be at the point where like you've chewed on something so many times. I think people often forget just like the power of being a positive person. People are really attracted to people that are like exude positivity. And again, you have to be doing something that you love to get that part of the equation right. But I would just say those are the few of the things. And then also get feedback. So like we had somebody the other day be like, hey, love you guys, but like we're saying no for these 2 reasons. And I'm thrilled. I was like, can we get on a call? I want you to tell me exactly what you were worried about. And I lean into those things. When people have told me no a bazillion times, and I just, it doesn't hurt my feelings, I'm like, great. I'm like, no, for now, because I'm coming back for you. And so like leaning into those authentically to be like, talk to me why. They're only going to make you smarter. And I'll say this is just generally, as an entrepreneur, as a CEO, as a, if you're an investor, whatever it may be, nobody actually tells you the truth. I mean, really, even your best friends very rarely will be like, ooh, it's time to go to the gym or whatever it may be. No one ever wants to hurt people's feelings. So really getting kernels of honest feedback is actually harder to do than we think. And when you do get them, it is such a blessing. And so one, like create the psychological safety around you that people can tell you really hard stuff. I'm fortunate, one of the other things that makes the whole equation work is everybody in Inspired Capital has been somebody I've known or worked with for maximum 18 years. Annie's at 11, and like Penny Pritzker's the one I've known the least, and it's been like 8 years. And so surrounding yourself with people who can be really tough on you because you all know that the love and trust is very real, lets you get smarter. So I think lean into the negative feedback. It's not, and it's hard to do, it did not come naturally to me out of the gate, but I do it more and more. I love all these questions, keep them coming.
Hi, you mentioned being an operator, and we hear this thrown around a lot, like an operator, an investor. I'm curious, can you just talk about some of the pros and cons and the perspectives, and then how you either counter one or the other when you're working with either investors or entrepreneurs?
Yeah, so I started my career at Insight Venture Partners on the investing side, then right after the acquisition started angel investing, and then was running Northwestern Mutual's venture fund. But for like 11 years, I was an operator, CEO, and then on the management team of a massive Fortune 50 company as the chief digital officer. So I've flexed both muscles, but they're very different muscles. They definitely are. And I think what I'm doing right now is also surrounding myself with people who are pure investors who can be like, that's a dumb idea, no. And then pure operators who are like, oh, I love this business plan. And making sure we hear both sides, because in me I have both sides, and I think it's really important. So I'll give you a perfect tip. We don't believe in Inspired Capital investing in companies, because sometimes you love an idea and you're like, man, this is such a big opportunity, I love the business model, but the entrepreneur, we ask ourselves the question, would we work for this entrepreneur? Literally, would we sign up to work, like today, like could I consider leaving Inspired Capital to go work for this entrepreneur? The answer is no, and we shouldn't invest, because what happens is, as the operator, you over-index on being like, I'm gonna be so helpful, and I'm gonna be able to do so many things, and the truth is you can't. So it's gotta be people that you would go work for because they do not need your help, but they're willing to listen to you. And that's like a very specific thing that I think the operator, investor, I myself could get wrong and make mistakes on, and so we put in very clear guardrails to think about that.
Hi, Alexa. Thank you so much for speaking. I've been so enthralled by everything you're saying.
You're so. Village Global just is really good at getting great people together, to be honest.
So my question is around, well, I should say, my perception of you is that you are unapologetically yourself. Like, down to how you dress, how you speak, you're just, this is who I am, hello. And I would say, in my experience, in most companies that I've worked with or helped create, it's been environments of almost all men. So like very much like the boys club, especially in Silicon Valley. And I have struggled with how to be unapologetically myself in those environments in particular. So I wonder if you have any advice on like, how do you stay true to who you are no matter where you are? I'd love to just hear a little bit about that.
First of all, thank you. I think that is such a nice compliment, and if life is just far too short to just not be who you are. I think the hard question sometimes is like knowing who you are, which I'm 35. So like I know who I am at 35 much better than I did at 30, much better than I did at 25. We were just laughing. Annie was like, oh, I'm gonna grab you a sandwich. Do you want the pesto? And I was like, I just decided at 35, I don't like pesto. And I was like, took me 35 years to be able to say it out loud. I think figuring out what you do and do not like is hard to do. So for one, you have to figure out what don't you like, because figuring out what you like often is easier to get to by saying, don't like this, don't like this, don't like this, not interested in this, when I'm doing these things, not happy, and like making the nots list before you make the love list, because sometimes the love, you get there faster that way. I only know how to be myself, and I will just say that there is definitely a part of me that is, I studied psychology and happiness at Harvard, that I never thought it would be worthwhile. My mom was like, what are you getting this degree in? Like, and I was like, I promise, I'm just studying something I'm interested in. And I realized it's been very helpful because we're really bad at knowing what makes us happy. And I took those lessons and I've just applied them to my life. And I think just learning who you are and just knowing that you only get one shot, so you like have to be okay with it, actually gives me this very deep confidence that is very real, which is, if you don't like me, I'm gonna go to another table. And I literally just told my 4-year-old this the other day. She was like, these 2 girls didn't let me play. And I said, go find the people who wanna play with you. Like, that is the best key to life, because you will find great people. You just have to keep moving. Again, you build some resilience in that, because you're like, I don't care if 10 people say no. I'm gonna go find the people that wanna say yes. And we are gonna be the best team together. So.
Can you talk a little bit about the book writing process? Like, at what point did you decide to write a book? Was there like a unique insight that inspired that journey?
So just one, I record it, so super helpful. Or I like to do outlines. And then Annie and I have now been together for 2 books, and we like lock ourselves in a room and give ourselves a deadline. And I love cramming for a test and giving myself just like, here's the goal, here's what we need to accomplish. So for me, you know, some people, everyone's different. Some people take years and draft notes, and I'm very much like, why do we want to do this? Why does it matter? And then what's an end date? And then just going for it. And again, technology is really helpful. You can like record so much and somebody else can type it out for you. So that's a little bit of how we went about it. And then I like doing any kind of version of a book tour, because you get to meet people in a really interesting way and have a conversation. And right now, I think the money touches everything, and the future of our wallets is super fascinating. And so it's just a conversation I'm really excited to have.
Hi, thanks for both of you for doing this. It's fantastic. My question is from an operating standpoint, whether fundraising or even the multi-month sale process of LearnVest, like the strategic alternatives and running the business are just so all-consuming, like just advice about doing both simultaneously.
You mean running the business while going through a fundraising?
Fundraising or selling or whatever, right? Like your team, even if you have an awesome team, like
It's
we do need you,
brutal.
and this needs you, but you have to be full on in
Yeah.
the process too.
So I'll give you an example. Going through our acquisition and running the business was miserable. And the way I did it was like only a few people could be in the acquisition process, and everybody else had to have blinders on running the business. So what I would say is, there are only 24 hours in a day, and like as much as it may sound like I've figured out how to warp time, I have not. And so I'm very disciplined about who's split, and it would be like, we're the acquisition team, you guys are running the company, and you cannot have people be unclear on that. So that's how we did it.
When you are dealing with rejection and your tears flowing out your eyes on your laptop, how do you quickly recover yourself, and what are the ways that you become better at it?
One, I do think that you just get better over time at just picking yourself back up. And so, you know, like if I rewind 10 years, like a first no, the stakes seem so high, oh my God, I'm never gonna make it. And you just realize it's a really big world with lots of people and lots of money, and somebody will say yes. You just have to go find that somebody. And so it's a little bit of an attitude. Also just figuring out things like getting real sleep, going to the gym, not drinking, like things that will just give you the resolve to be able to have a positive attitude. Because if you're at your like absolute like mental thinnest because you haven't slept and you haven't gotten any exercise, and you need a best friend or two in the equation who's like, you're good, you've got this, get back in there. My husband is like the biggest blessing of my life, because when I'm like a disaster of stress, he is like the calmest, and he's like, you got this, get back in there, go. And we are just such a good, like honestly, yin to the yang. So I would say that's a little bit, and over time you just start getting better at it. And don't mistake this. Does that mean that like my feelings don't get hurt today in 2019? Of course they do. I'm human. It just, I think the stakes seem lower, things are okay, we'll figure this out. And I do believe that you can pretty much accomplish anything if you like really, really focus and put hard work in it. If you really want to figure something out, you will. It's just a matter of sacrifice and time.
Well, that is an exciting note to end on. Very inspiring and from Inspired Capital. And so, Alexa, thank you so much for sharing your time and the book.
Thank you guys so much for having me again. I'm like the biggest fan ever of Village Global. And feel free to just follow me on Instagram. You can direct message me if you have any other questions, or if you want to send me anything, or in any way, just at Alexa Von Tobel, so, or at Inspired Cap.
Thank you so much. And so the event is officially over, but two things. If we have a little gift for you at the back, plus Alexa's book, and Alexa has volunteered to sign the book. And so, and then please feel free to stay until 2 o'clock if you just want to. There's amazing people in this room, all very friendly. So please mix and mingle because there's lots of amazing people.
So friendly, such a good group.
And you are a happiness expert and an inspiration of happiness, but we believe the secret to happiness is gratitude. So this is a little gratitude
Oh
journal.
my God, this is the cool, thank you. Thank you so
You're
much.
welcome.
Thank you guys so much for having me.